The office door clicked shut, sealing Ethan Harper in a world of numbers and silence. Outside, the hum of Denver's downtown faded, leaving only the low drone of the air conditioner and the faint tap of his fingers on the mahogany desk. Spreadsheets glowed across his monitor, their red and yellow cells screaming warnings. Store 4 down 12%. Store 7 worse 18% drop, 2 quarters in a row. Ethan leaned back in his leather chair, his jaw tight, one hand resting on the mouse, the other pressing lightly against his temple. The numbers weren't just data. They were a betrayal of everything his father had built. Harper Tech, the chain of tech retail stores his father, William Harper, founded in the 90s, was supposed to be different. William had opened the first store with a handshake and a promise. Treat every customer like family, every employee like a partner. Ethan remembered trailing behind his father as a boy, watching him greet cashiers by name, ask about their kids, their weekends. Respect isn't a title, William used to say, his voice warm but firm. It's built from the floor up. Now, 30 years later, with 47 stores across the Midwest, that ethos felt like a ghost haunting Ethan's inbox. He scrolled through the customer feedback tab. Words jumped off the screen like shards of glass. Asterisk rude staff. No help. Felt ignored. Asterisk. One review from Store 7, the flagship location in Aurora, burned deepest. Asterisk. I stood at the counter for 10 minutes. No one even looked up. I could have walked out with half the store. Ethan's stomach twisted. Store 7 wasn't just any location. It was the first, the one William had poured his heart into, the one where Ethan had learned to shake hands with every employee before they left for the day. If it was failing, it wasn't just losing money. It was losing his father's legacy. Ethan closed the report window and opened another. Employee turnover logs. The trend was a steady downward spiral. Complaints about low morale, inconsistent. Training and pressure to meet impossible sales targets piled up like unpaid bills. He reached for a yellow notepad, scribbling 2 numbers at the top, 4 and 7. He circled them twice, the pen digging into the paper. Too many excuses. Too many emails from Nathan Brooks, his director of operations, promising adjustments and optimized workflows. Nathan's dashboards were pristine, but they hid the truth. Ethan needed to see it for himself. He opened a drawer, his fingers brushing past pens and a warm stress ball before landing on a small, faded photograph. The edges were soft, the corners curled from years of handling. In it, William Harper stood in front of Store 1, his white shirt rolled at the sleeves, a name tag pinned to his chest. William, owner. He was smiling, not the polished grin of a CEO, but the kind you couldn't fake. His arms slung around a young employee whose name Ethan couldn't recall but whose face he'd never forget. The store smelled of fresh paint back then, of ambition and care. William knew every employee's birthday, their spouses' names, who worked weekends without complaint. That was Harper Tech once. Ethan set the photo beside the monitor. The contrast stark. A world of people on one side, a world of charts on the other. The stores weren't just failing financially. They were failing William. Ethan's eyes flicked back to the numbers. Store 7's accessory sales were up, sure, but customer dwell time was climbing, a polite way of saying people were waiting. Too long for help. He could hear Nathan's voice already, smooth and rehearsed. Asterisk. Conversion rates are stable. We're tracking slightly below forecast, but upsell ratios look good. Ethan's jaw tightened. Nathan lived in his tablet, in graphs and metrics, not in the aisles where customers stood ignored. It wasn't just Store 7. The entire industry was shifting under Ethan's feet. By 2025, retail was a battlefield. Amazon's same-day delivery. Drones buzzed over suburbs, and automated kiosks in big-box stores promised frictionless shopping. Customers didn't just want products anymore. They wanted experiences, personalization, a reason to step into a store instead of clicking a button. HarperTech was losing that battle. Online reviews compared their service to wandering a ghost town, while competitors rolled out AI-driven chatbots and virtual try-ons. Ethan had resisted fully automating self-checkout. Kiosks felt like a betrayal of his father's handshake philosophy, but the numbers didn't lie. Something had to change. He leaned forward, elbows on the desk, and opened his email. Nathan's latest report sat at the top, titled Q3 Performance Summary. Ethan didn't click it. Instead, he scrolled through his contacts, pausing at a name he hadn't called in years. Sarah Coleman, a theater wardrobe specialist he'd met at a charity gala. Her laugh had been the loudest in the room, her stories of transforming actors into strangers even louder. If anyone could help him see the truth, it was her, he said when she picked up, his voice low but steady. You still do disguises? She laughed, sharp and warm. Ethan Harper, calling me after what? 5 years? What's the role? King Lear or undercover spy? An old man, he said, glancing at the photo of his father. A little slower. Then me, glasses, maybe cargo pants. The kind of guy no one notices in a store. Sarah paused, then chuckled. You're serious? What's this for? I need to see my company the way customers do. No filters, no reports. Just the truth. CEO going rogue, she said, her tone teasing but intrigued. All right, I'm in, but you owe me coffee. Tomorrow my studio, 9 a.m. Ethan hung up, his pulse quickening. The decision felt reckless, but it was the only way. Nathan's dashboards couldn't show him what was broken. KPIs didn't capture the moment a customer walked away unseen. If HarperTech was losing its soul, Ethan needed to feel that loss himself. The next morning, Sarah's studio smelled of fabric dye and coffee. A small suitcase sat open on a cluttered table, filled with wigs, prosthetics, and a mirror propped against a stack of scripts. Ethan stood in the center, feeling oddly exposed as Sarah circled him like a sculptor assessing clay. You want invisible. I'll make you invisible, she said, holding up a gray wig, thinning at the crown. But you've got to sell it. Walk slower, slump a bit. People ignore old men because they expect them to be weak. Use that. Ethan nodded, slipping on the cargo pants she handed him. They hung loose, unfamiliar. Next came a faded polo slightly oversized and a pair of thick-rimmed glasses that made the room blur at the edges. Sarah dabbed age spots onto his hands with a makeup brush, her movements precise. Voice, she said, stepping back. Soften it. Add a drawl, not too southern. Just worn. Excuse me, son, Ethan practiced, his voice lower, rougher. Looking for a laptop. Maybe for my grandson. Sarah grinned. Not bad. You sound like my Uncle Ray. Now walk. He shuffled across the room, knees stiff, shoulders rounded. The mirror reflected a stranger. James Carter, 70-something. Unassuming. The kind of man who blended into the background of any store. Ethan stared at the reflection, his own sharp eyes hidden behind the glasses. For the first time in years, he wasn't the man in charge. He was nobody. You sure about this? Sarah asked, adjusting the wig. You're the CEO. You could. Just fire someone. That's why I'm doing it, Ethan said, his voice steady despite the disguise. I need to know what's broken before I can fix it. Sarah handed him a folded receipt. Buy something cheap. Blend in. No one trusts a shopper who asks too much. She paused, her eyes narrowing. And Ethan? Don't expect it to be pretty. He nodded, tucking the receipt into his pocket. The weight of the disguise settled over him, not just the wig or the glasses, but the purpose. He wasn't just testing his employees. He was testing himself, his father's legacy, the very idea of Harper Tech. If the stores were failing, it wasn't just about money. It was about trust, respect, the things William had built from the floor up. Ethan's SUV idled in the parking lot of Store 7, its glass facade gleaming under the Colorado sun. The sign above read Harper Tech. Your tech, your way. But the words felt hollow. He adjusted the glasses, checked the wig in the rearview mirror, and exhaled. His phone buzzed Nathan with another email about streamlined metrics. Ethan ignored it. He stepped out, his steps deliberately slow, the gravel crunching under his worn sneakers. The automatic doors loomed ahead, their soft chime waiting to swallow him whole. Inside, A.B. James Carter, a nobody with a question. Outside, he was still Ethan Harper, carrying the weight of 47 stores, 3,000 employees, and a promise to a man who wasn't here anymore. He gripped the receipt in his pocket, the edges crinkling. If something was broken, he'd see it. And if it could be fixed, he'd find a way. The doors slid open. Ethan stepped inside. The automatic doors of Harper Tech Store 7 slid open with a soft chime, and Ethan Harper, disguised as James Carter, shuffled inside. The bright fluorescent lights stung his eyes through the thick glasses Sarah had fitted him with, their weight pinching the bridge of his nose. His cargo pants sagged at the waist, the oversized polo swallowing his frame. Each step was deliberate, slower than his usual stride, his shoulders rounded to match the slouch of a man 20 years older. The air smelled of plastic packaging and faint lemon cleaner, but the polished floors and gleaming screens couldn't mask the hollowness Ethan felt the moment he crossed the threshold. No one looked up. To his right, two employees leaned against the accessories counter, their voices low, punctuated by the occasional chuckle. One scrolled through a phone. The other watched a video, earbuds dangling. A third sat behind the service desk, tapping a pen against a tablet screen, her gaze fixed downward. Ethan paused just inside the entrance, adjusting his glasses, letting his eyes wander as if unsure where to go. Still nothing. No greeting, no eye contact. No. Can I help? You? He shifted his weight, his hand brushing the folded receipt in his jacket pocket. The silence stretched, broken only by the hum of a display TV looping a drone ad. For a moment, Ethan didn't feel like a CEO in disguise. He felt like James Carter, old, invisible, in the way. He moved toward the laptop aisle, his sneakers scuffing softly against the tiles. The shelves were lined with sleek machines, their screens glowing with promises of speed and power. Ethan stopped at a display marked Performance Laptops, his eyes landing on a gaming model with a sign taped below. Asterisk, $849. Today only. He squinted, double-checking the price. The clean print, unambiguous. A shadow moved to his left, and he turned to see a young employee approaching, chewing gum, thumb still tapping on his phone before he pocketed it. Need something? The employee asked, his tone flat, almost bored. His name tag read Jake Collins, Sales Associate. Ethan cleared his throat, softening his voice to match James Carter's drawl. This one, he said, pointing at the laptop. For my grandson. He's 16, plays games, does schoolwork. Jake nodded once, barely glancing at the tag. Yeah, that's a good one. $1,400. Ethan blinked, his finger tracing the sign. Sorry, son, it says $849 here. Jake didn't look. Tag's wrong. They didn't update it. Happens a lot. He crossed his arms, his jaw working the gum, his eyes drifting toward the counter where his colleagues still scrolled. Ethan tilted his head, keeping his tone calm. Could you double-check the system? Just in case? Jake shook his head, a short laugh escaping. No, I'm sure. I know this one. It's $1,400. His voice carried a certainty that felt more like dismissal than confidence. He didn't move, didn't check, just stood there, waiting for Ethan to agree or walk away. Ethan studied him. Jake's posture was casual, his face blank, no urgency, no interest. The difference wasn't just the number. It was how little Jake seemed to care whether he was right. Ethan nodded slowly, letting the moment hang. "All right," he said, stepping back. "I'll think it over." Jake shrugged and strolled off, already pulling his phone back out. Ethan watched him disappear down the aisle, his hand tightening around the receipt in his pocket. It wasn't the price that stung. It was the lie, delivered without hesitation, as if the truth didn't matter. He lingered by the display, his eyes scanning the store. To his left, a woman in her 50s sat on a bench near the service desk, glancing at her watch, then at the empty counter. A man stood by the headphone wall, holding two boxes, his head turning in search of help that never came. Across the floor, a teenage boy tapped his foot while his mother scrolled through her phone, both looking tired, unsure who to ask. The employees at the accessories counter laughed again, one sipping from a branded coffee cup, the other nodding. Along, phone still in hand. No urgency, no movement. Ethan's chest tightened. This wasn't a storm. It was a slow leak, bleeding trust one ignored customer at a time. He moved toward the printer aisle, his steps careful, mimicking James Carter's cautious gait. An older woman walked nearby, her hands gripping her purse strap, one foot dragging slightly. She approached another employee leaning against a support column, his eyes half fixed on a screen behind the counter. His name tag read Ryan Parker, sales associate. "Excuse me, young man," the woman said, her voice soft but clear. "Could you tell me where the restroom is?" Ryan didn't turn, didn't move. He jerked his thumb over his shoulder. "Somewhere." "That way," he mumbled, his fingers still tapping on his phone. The woman blinked, glanced in the vague direction he pointed, then hesitated. Her lips parted, but no words came. She started walking, slow and uncertain, down the wrong aisle. Ryan never looked up. Ethan watched from 10 feet away, his hands curling slightly at his sides. There was no shouting, no confrontation, just a moment that landed heavier than it looked. Disrespect didn't need words. It thrived in indifference. He shifted toward the mobile accessories corner, his eyes catching a quieter scene. A young woman with a simple ponytail knelt beside the older woman from before, now seated near the service desk. Her hands trembled as she held a cracked phone, its screen dim. "I just need to save the pictures," she said softly. "They're of my grandson. He's 6. The employee, her name tag reads Sophie Miller, sales support, smiled. Not wide, but steady. "No problem. We'll get them backed up. I'll walk you through it." Her voice was calm, unhurried, as she explained cloud storage step by step, never touching the phone, letting the woman follow at her own pace. The woman nodded, squinting at the screen, focusing hard. Sophie stayed beside her, patient, present, as if this one task was the most important thing in the world. Ethan watched in silence. No script, no upsell, just care. Real care. In a store full of noise and neglect, Sophie's quiet honesty stood out like a beacon. He moved back to the laptop aisle, pausing at the same gaming model. The $849 sign hadn't changed. Jake strolled by again, gum still popping. Ethan raised a hand. "Excuse me, about that laptop." Jake cut him off. "Man, I told you, it's $1,400. Promo ended last week." He didn't check, didn't move, just crossed his arms like the conversation was over. Ethan tilted his head. "You sure it's not $849? Could you scan it just so I know?" Jake sighed, loud and deliberate. "I'm telling you, I work here. I know what I'm talking about." He turned, walking away without another word. Ethan stood still, one hand on the shelf. The lie wasn't just in the price. It was in Jake's certainty, his refusal to verify, his dismissal of a customer as if they were a nuisance. Footsteps approached, softer this time. Ethan turned to see Sophie standing beside him, her expression gentle but attentive. "I couldn't help overhearing," she said. "That price is correct. It's $849, part of a weekend promo that ends tonight." Ethan raised an eyebrow. He said it was $1,400. Sophie frowned, just enough to register. "No, that's not right. It's definitely $849. I can double-check if you want." "I'd appreciate that," Ethan said, his voice still soft, testing her. She nodded, offering a small, sincere smile. "I'll be right back." Sophie moved to the terminal, her fingers quick but precise, typing with the ease of someone who knew the system but didn't hide behind it. A few taps, a scroll, then she returned. "Price is valid," she said simply. $849, just like the tag says. "Ends tonight. No mistakes?" Ethan asked, meeting her eyes. She shook her head. "No, sir. It's a weekend promo." She didn't pitch, didn't push, just stated the facts. "If you're interested, I can hold it at the register while you look around." "That'd be helpful," Ethan said. "Thank you. You're welcome." Sophie gave another small smile and walked away. No rush in her steps, no attitude. Just someone doing her job right. Ethan stepped back, his hands loosely clasped. He pulled a small notepad from his pocket, its pages clean, folded once down the middle. He wrote 3 names. Jake Collins, lead, no hesitation, no check. Ryan Parker, dismissed the customer, didn't move, didn't look. Sophie Miller, honest, present, patient. He tapped the pen against the paper, his expression unreadable. The store hummed around him, but the truth was clear. 2 were tearing it apart. 1 was holding it together. He glanced at the counter, where Jake joked with another employee, his voice too loud for the quiet store. Ryan slouched near the chargers, scrolling again. Sophie moved past them, answering a customer's question without stopping. Ethan tucked the notepad away. Something settled behind his eyes, sharper, clearer. Not frustration, not surprise, but clarity. He wasn't James Carter anymore. He was Ethan Harper, and he'd seen enough. The morning sun cut sharp angles across the parking lot of Harper Tech Store 7, glinting off the glass facade. Ethan Harper stepped out of his SUV, no wig, no glasses, no slouch. His black polo and dark jeans were a quiet contrast to the loose cargo pants of James Carter, the old man he'd been yesterday. His steps were measured, his jaw set, but his eyes carried a weight deeper than anger, disappointment, tempered by resolve. The notepad from yesterday sat in his pocket, its 3 names etched in his mind. Jake Collins, Ryan Parker, Sophie Miller. 2 had failed the store. 1 had saved it. Today, he'd set things right. The automatic doors slid open, the familiar chime echoing in the lobby. The air inside was the same plastic and lemon cleaner, but the context had shifted. Ethan wasn't invisible anymore. He was the CEO, the name on every paycheck, the son of William Harper. Jake stood behind the register, his gum popping as he glanced up, his eyes narrowing for a half second. Recognition flickered, but not fully. He saw a face, not a context. Ryan leaned against the accessories wall, chatting with another employee, his arms folded, oblivious. Ethan paused by the customer service desk, his voice low but clear. "Is Sophie in?" The woman behind the desk, her name tag reading Mia Torres, nodded. "She's on break. Back in 10. "Thanks," Ethan said, his gaze sweeping the floor. He didn't speak to anyone else. Not yet. Today wasn't about pretending. It was about confronting. He moved to the back office, arms crossed, and waited. The assistant manager, a wiry man named Greg, picked up the intercom. "Jake Collins and Ryan Parker to the office, please." A pause, then footsteps. Jake walked in first, his posture casual, gum still in his mouth. Ryan followed, slower, his arms loose at his sides. They stopped short when they saw Ethan, their eyes darting between his face and the absence of a name tag. The hum of the overhead light filled the silence. "Have a seat," Ethan said, his voice steady, not offering a chair for himself. They stayed standing, Jake squinting, Ryan shifting his weight. "Do either of you recognize me?" Ethan asked, his tone calm but sharp, like a blade sheathed but ready. Jake's brows furrowed. "You're the guy from yesterday, the laptop guy." Ethan nodded once. "I am, and I'm also the name on your paycheck." The room went cold, the air tightening. Jake's face tightened, his mouth half open. Ryan's jaw clenched, his eyes dropping to the floor. "I'm Ethan Harper," Ethan continued, "owner of Harper Tech, every store, including this one." Jake's gums stopped moving. Ryan's shoulders stiffened. The silence was a weight, pressing down on them both. "Let's try this again," Ethan said, stepping forward, his voice lowering. "Who am I?" "You were asking about the weekend promo," Ryan muttered, his voice hesitant, piecing it together. "The gaming laptop." Ethan nodded, his eyes locking on Jake. "And you told me it was $1,400. Twice. No scan. No check. No doubt." "You lied to me." Jake's face paled, but he found his voice. "I thought the price had changed. The system updates sometimes, and—" "You didn't say sometimes?" Ethan cut in, his tone steady but unyielding. "You said you were." "Sure. You told me not to check the system. You gambled I wouldn't notice." He paused, letting the words sink in. "Why?" Jake fidgeted, his eyes darting to the side. "Look, they push us to hit margins. Upsell where we can. I was told to be confident, close the sale." Ethan's gaze didn't waver. "You were told to lie?" "No," Jake said quickly. "Just prioritize profit. It's what keeps the store running." Ethan took a step closer. "You didn't push a product. You pushed a lie. That's not salesmanship. That's manipulation." Jake swallowed hard, his excuses crumbling. Ethan turned to Ryan. "And you?" "A woman asked for the restroom. You pointed without looking, sent her the wrong way, and went back to your phone. Why?" Ryan shifted, his voice low. "It was a busy day. I didn't think. You didn't think," Ethan echoed, his voice flat. "That's the problem. You didn't think about her, or the customer waiting at the counter, or the kid looking for help with headphones. You didn't think about this store." He let the silence build, his eyes moving between them. "I came here undercover, not to trap you, but to see if my father's values still live on this floor. They don't." Jake opened his mouth, his voice uneven. "Wait, sir, I didn't mean." "This isn't a debate," Ethan said, his tone final. "You're both done here." Effective immediately. Ryan's eyes widened. "You're firing us? Just like that?" "No," Ethan said, his voice cold but clear. "I'm firing you because you earned it." He turned to Greg, who stood by the door. "Cancel their system access. Remove store credentials today." Greg nodded and stepped out. Jake stood frozen, his face a mix of shock and defiance. Ryan moved first, his shoulders tight, walking out without a word. Jake followed, his steps heavy, lips pressed. The door clicked shut behind them. The office was quiet again, but the air felt lighter, as if a shadow had been lifted. Ethan exhaled, his hand brushing the notepad in his pocket. He didn't need to look at it. The names were burned into his mind, but one stood out: Sophie Miller. He stepped out of the office, scanning the floor until he saw her returning from break. Tucking her name tag back onto her shirt, she paused. When she saw him, her eyes narrowing slightly. Recognition dawning. "You probably don't recognize me without the gray hair," Ethan said, a faint smile breaking his stern expression. Sophie blinked. "You were the grandpa with the laptop." "I was," Ethan said, stepping closer, his voice low but certain. "And you're the reason I still believe in this place." Her eyes widened, a flicker of confusion crossing her face. "Sir, I was just doing my job." "No," Ethan said. "You were doing it right. You told the truth when it wasn't easy. You helped someone without being asked. You cared." He paused, meeting her gaze. "Store 7 needs leadership. Real leadership. Not titles or years, but someone who shows up for people. That's you." Sophie swallowed, her posture stiffening. "Me? I've never managed anyone. I don't even know the back-end systems that well." "Skills can be trained," Ethan said, his voice steady. "Values can't. You've got the ones that matter." He leaned forward slightly. "I'm asking you to step up. Floor manager, starting today." She stared at him, a nervous laugh escaping. "I don't know if I'm ready." "You're not," Ethan said plainly. "No one ever is. But you care, and that's where it starts." He offered a small nod. "Think it over. I'll be back tomorrow." Sophie nodded slowly, her hands trembling slightly, but something new flickered in her eyes. Responsibility, possibility, a quiet kind of power. Ethan turned, his steps carrying him toward the exit. The store hummed around him, still flawed, still leaking trust, but a spark had been lit. He'd seen it in Sophie's eyes. Now, it was up to her to carry it forward. The fluorescent lights of Harper Tech Store 7 buzzed overhead, casting stark shadows across the sales floor. Sophie Miller stood near the break room, her hands clasped tightly. Her name tag, now reading Sophie Miller, floor manager. The promotion felt like a weight she wasn't sure she could carry. Yesterday, she'd been just another sales associate, helping customers with cracked phones and tangled cables. Now, she was expected to lead a team that barely noticed her before. Her stomach churned as she glanced at the clock. 8:58 a.m., 2 minutes until the morning huddle. She smoothed her shirt, took a breath, and stepped forward. The team gathered. In a loose semicircle, some leaning against the wall, others checking their phones. Mia Torres, the service desk associate, gave Sophie a small nod, her eyes warm but cautious. Others, like Noah Evans, a lanky sales associate with earbuds dangling from one ear, barely looked up. Sophie cleared her throat, her voice quieter than she intended. "Thanks for being here," she said. "I know this week's been intense, but we've got a chance to reset." A few heads lifted. Mia folded her arms, listening. Noah tapped his phone, half present, his earbuds still in. Sophie's pulse quickened, but she kept her tone even. "We can't fix everything overnight, but we can fix how we treat each other. And our customers. One rule from now on, no one gets ignored." The words hung in the air. Mia nodded again, a faint smile tugging at her lips. Another associate, Jenna, shifted her weight, her eyes meeting Sophie's for a moment. Noah, though, stayed slouched, his thumb scrolling, his face blank. Sophie paused, her gaze lingering on him. "Noah," she said, gentle but firm, "I need your attention." He didn't flinch, still scrolling, still in his own world. A quiet tension rippled through the group, tight and awkward. No one spoke. Sophie waited, her hands steady despite the nerves clawing at her chest. "I know this is new," she said, softly, addressing the group but keeping her eyes on Noah. "But it matters. If we're showing up, let's actually show up." A beat of silence. Noah pulled one earbud out, but his eyes stayed on his phone. It wasn't defiance, not quite, but it wasn't respect either. Sophie exhaled, nodding once as if marking something in her mind. "Doors open in 5, she said. "Let's have a better day." The team dispersed, murmuring low. Noah slouched toward the counter, both earbuds back in. Sophie watched him go, her jaw tight. She'd drawn a line, but it felt like drawing on sand one wave, and it could vanish. The morning rush hit like a freight train. 2 team members called in sick, leaving the floor understaffed. A delivery of tablets was delayed, and the printer at the service desk jammed mid-return, spitting out half-printed receipts. Sophie moved between stations, her eyes scanning the chaos. A customer in a green jacket waved for help with the soundbar. Another demanded a refund without a receipt. A toddler's cries echoed from the accessories aisle. Sophie's head spun, but she kept moving. "Jenna, focus on the guy in green," she called. "Mia, take a breath. I'll grab the call." Her own list of tasks piled up. Check inventory, approve a return, answer a customer's email about a delayed order. The store's outdated system didn't help. Its clunky interface lagged, forcing her to double-check every entry. Customers in 2025 expected speed, seamless service, the kind of efficiency they got from clicking "Buy Now" on Amazon. Sophie felt the gap between what they wanted and what Store 7 could deliver. She leaned on the counter for a second, just long enough to catch her breath. Her eyes said what her voice didn't. "This is harder than I thought." A woman stepped through the doors, one hand clutching a reusable shopping bag, the other steady on her son's shoulder. The boy, about 8, had his arm in a cast, a cracked tablet clutched in his good hand. They hovered near the entrance, unsure. Sophie saw them from across the room. She didn't wave or shout instructions. Instead, she walked over, her steps calm, and crouched slightly to meet the boy's eyes. "Rough week, huh?" she said, her voice soft, a small smile breaking through. The boy nodded, his gaze dropping to the tablet. Sophie glanced at the mother, who looked exhausted, her eyes rimmed with worry. "Let's fix what we can," Sophie said, guiding them to the service desk. She didn't rush through the intake, explaining the repair process clearly, offering a loaner tablet if needed. "There's this game you can play offline," she added, winking at the boy. "No screen required, just a deck of cards." The mother exhaled, her shoulders loosening just enough. "Thank you," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. For a moment, in the middle of the chaos, Sophie created a pocket of calm not by fixing everything, but by listening, by being there. The bell above the entrance chimed, but it wasn't a customer. A woman stepped in, tall, with short gray hair and an expression that could cut glass. Her plain black bag hit the counter with a thud. Claire Bennett didn't smile or wave. She scanned the room like a surgeon entering an operating theater. Ethan met her halfway, his voice low. "Thanks for coming, Claire." She nodded once. "I don't do icebreakers. I do results." She set her bag down, revealing a notepad and 2 pens, no laptop. "I don't need tech to fix people," she muttered. Sophie approached, cautious, her name tag catching the light. Claire gave her a sharp once-over. "You're the one holding this together." Sophie nodded, her voice steady but unsure. "Trying to." "Good," Claire said. "I'm not here to take over. I'm here to see if you're real. No pep talk, no checklist, just presence." Claire moved to the back room, her eyes already on the whiteboard where shifts were scrolled. Sophie followed, feeling the weight of Claire's gaze, a mix of challenge and expectation. Later, Claire stood in the back room, arms folded, addressing the team. "4 of you are doing the work," she said flatly, her pen tapping 3 names. Sophie, Mia, Jenna. The rest? Invisible, drifting, hiding. She drew a line under Noah's name and 2 others. "You want fairness?" Start with effort. Noah shifted uncomfortably in the corner, his earbuds now tucked away, but his posture still defiant. Sophie watched, reading the team's reactions: guilt, tension, challenge. Claire didn't wait for responses. She walked away, her point made. After hours, Sophie sat at the service desk, a legal pad in front of her, scribbling ideas. Asterisk daily check-ins. Rotating lead shifts. Asterisk Ethan pulled up a chair, a cup of black coffee in hand. We need a deputy, he said. Not a babysitter, a builder. Sophie nodded, her pen pausing. Someone who sees ahead, not just reacts. Exactly, Ethan. Sod, tapping the table. Think structure, not patchwork. She flipped to a fresh page, writing. Asterisk listens without ego. Teaches without flexing. Stays when it's messy. Asterisk Ethan watched, silent. You planning to hire them or become them? He asked, a faint smile in his voice. Sophie's lips curved, a rare moment of ease. A bit of both. He leaned back. Good. You're not building for today. You're building what should have been here all along. Sophie looked out at the empty floor. The lights dimmed, the displays silent. The store felt heavier now. Not from fear, but from expectation. She didn't know all the systems, hadn't led meetings before, hadn't written schedules. But Ethan's words echoed. You just need to care. She gripped her pen, her hand steady now. It wasn't simple, but it was clear. The store hadn't opened yet, its lights half dimmed, the floor still dusty from yesterday's rush. Sophie Miller arrived early, her backpack slung over one shoulder. Her new role as floor manager still settling like an ill-fitting coat. She paused at the entrance, expecting the usual quiet chaos of pre-opening prep. Instead, she saw a figure kneeling near the front doors, scrubbing the entry tiles with a mop. The man stood as she approached, his smile easy, unforced. His name tag read Lucas Hayes, sales associate. You don't start till next week, Sophie said, her brow furrowing. Lucas shrugged, wiping his hands on his jeans. I know. Figured if I'm going to lead here someday, I might as well start by earning the ground I stand on. Sophie blinked, glancing at the spotless tiles. You don't need to impress me. I'm not, Lucas replied, his voice steady. Just doing what I'd want someone to do if I walked in at 9 o'clock. Ethan Harper stepped through the doors moments later, a coffee cup in hand. He paused, taking in the scene. Who gave you the mop? He asked, his tone neutral but curious. No. One, Lucas said, meeting Ethan's gaze. Figured the store deserves better. Ethan exchanged a glance with Sophie. No handshake, no grand gesture. But the message was clear. Lucas wasn't here to manage. He was here to serve. Sophie felt a flicker of relief, a small crack in the weight she'd been carrying. Maybe she wasn't alone in this. The morning unfolded with a quieter rhythm than the chaos of the past week. Sophie, guided by Claire Bennett's blunt advice, had started small changes. Daily check-ins, rotating lead shifts, and a focus on listening to customers. She stood near the service desk, watching the team settle into their roles. Mia Torres, now more confident, handled a repair ticket with practiced ease, her voice calm as she explained options to a customer. Jenna, another associate, moved between displays, straightening cables, and answering questions with a newfound attentiveness. The air felt different, not perfect, but less fractured dot near the back. Lucas stood beside a couple in their 30s, their expressions unsure as they eyed a wall of smart TVs. The man read specs on a box, while the woman glanced at price tags. Her phone opened to an Amazon comparison. Lucas didn't hover or pitch. What do you mostly watch? He asked, his tone conversational. Sports, movies, kid stuff? Mostly streaming, the man said. Shows, sometimes mirroring. From our phones, Lucas nodded, pointing to a mid-range model. Then, you don't need the top-tier one. This gives you what you need: 4K, casting, solid refresh rate, and saves you a few hundred. The man blinked, surprised. You're not trying to upsell us? Lucas smiled, easy but genuine. I'd rather you come back happy than frustrated. The couple laughed, disarmed, their decision suddenly simple. Sophie watched from a distance, her arms crossed, a faint smile tugging at her lips. She didn't interrupt, didn't need to. Lucas's approach wasn't loud, but it was exactly what Store 7 needed, one honest moment at a time. The 2025 retail landscape demanded more than just sales. Customers walked in with apps that scanned barcodes, compared prices, and read reviews. In real time. Sophie had seen a customer earlier that morning use a QR code to pull up a laptop specs, cross-checking Harper-Tech's price against an online retailer. Lucas, noticing the same trend, had started using the store's tablet system to show customers side-by-side comparisons, blending technology with trust. It's not about beating Amazon, he'd said to Sophie during a break. It's about giving them a reason to stay. Sophie nodded, scribbling the idea on her legal pad. Asterisk train team on QR code tools. Show, don't sell. Asterisk, it was a small shift, but it felt like progress. Claire Bennett's presence lingered like a shadow, sharp and unyielding. During a midday huddle, she stood at the back, her notepad open, jotting observations without a word. Sophie led the team, her voice steadier now. We had a customer yesterday, she said, her eyes sweeping the group. A mom with a kid in a cast. Her tablet was broken, but what she really needed was someone to listen. That's what we did. That's what changes this place. Mia nodded, her arms folded but her expression soft. Jenna glanced at Lucas, who stood at the back, fully present. Noah Evans, however, leaned against the wall, his earbuds tucked away but his posture still distant. Sophie caught his gaze, holding it for a moment. We're not just selling tech, she continued. We're building trust. That starts with us. The team dispersed, but Noah lingered, his eyes on his phone again. Sophie approached, her voice low. Noah, if you're here, be here. We need everyone. He shrugged, not meeting her eyes. I'm here, aren't I? Sophie's jaw tightened, but she didn't push. Claire, watching from the corner, wrote something in her notepad. Asterisk Noah, drifting. Address. Asterisk Sophie felt the weight of Claire's scrutiny, a reminder that leadership wasn't just about inspiring, it was about holding the line. Ethan sat in a quiet corner near the stockroom, his phone pressed to his ear. I need someone who's trained real teams, he said, his voice low but firm. Not someone who lives in slides. 6 weeks minimum, embedded on the floor. A pause as the person on the other end replied. Ethan glanced through the glass, watching Sophie check inventory with Mia, answering questions between keystrokes. She's good, he said, but even good people crack without support. Another pause, then, let Sophie screen the candidates. She knows what we need. He hung up, exhaling a long breath. No fist pump, no dramatic gesture, just a small nod to himself. Change didn't happen in speeches or memos. It happened in decisions like this, quiet, deliberate, with people who showed up. Later, Sophie found Ethan by the service desk, her legal pad tucked under her arm. I'm trying, she said, her voice low, but I don't know if I'm enough. You don't have to be, Ethan said, his tone steady. You just have to keep going. The team's starting to see it. Sophie glanced at the floor, where Lucas was helping a customer scan a QR code to compare monitors. Mia was walking a teenager through a headphone setup, her patience mirroring Sophie's. They're trying too, Sophie said, a flicker of hope in her voice. That's the difference, Ethan said. They're following you, not a title. Sophie nodded, her hands less shaky now. The store wasn't fixed, not yet. But it was moving, inch by inch, towards something better. Lucas's. Mop. Mia's patience, Jenna's effort. They were small sparks, but they were enough to keep her going. The morning light spilled across the Harper Tech Store 7 parking lot, softer now, less harsh than the days before. Sophie Miller stood at the front of the break room, her hands no longer clasped in nervous tension, but resting lightly on a table. The team gathered for the morning huddle, their faces a mix of focus and fatigue. Mia Torres leaned forward, attentive. Jenna adjusted her name tag, ready to listen. Lucas Hayes stood at the back, his presence quiet but steady. Even Noah Evans was there, earbuds absent for once, though his posture still hinted at reluctance. Sophie cleared her throat, her voice clear, no longer wavering. "We've made changes this week," she said, her eyes sweeping the group. Not because of new rules or someone watching, but because some of you chose better, kinder, more present. She paused, letting the words settle. This place grows when we show up for each other and for every person who walks through those doors. Mia nodded, a small smile breaking through. Lucas's eyes met Sophie's, a silent acknowledgement. Noah shifted, his gaze dropping, but he didn't reach for his phone. The room felt alive, not perfect, but moving towards something real. Sophie took a breath, her hand steady. "Let's keep it going," she said. "Doors open in 10. As the team dispersed, Sophie caught Claire Bennett's eye from the corner. Claire gave a single nod, her notepad tucked away, her expression unreadable but satisfied. She'd be leaving soon, her 6-week stint nearly over, but her presence had left a mark sharp, unyielding, a reminder that leadership wasn't about being liked but about being real. Ethan Harper stood outside the break room, unseen, his hands in his pockets. He watched Sophie lead, her voice steady, her words simple but weighted with purpose. She wasn't the hesitant associate from a week ago. She was something more, someone who didn't need a title to command respect. He turned, walking toward the exit without a word. He didn't need to stay. The right person was already in the room. Later, Ethan found Sophie at the service desk, a legal pad open, her pen moving quickly. "We need a deputy," he said, pulling up a chair. "Someone to build with you, not just follow." Sophie nodded, her pen pausing. "Lucas," she said without hesitation. "He's not here for a paycheck. He's here for the same reason I am." Ethan raised an eyebrow, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "You're sure?" "He mopped the floor before his first shift," Sophie said, her voice steady. "He didn't have to, but he did. That's who we need." Ethan leaned back, his coffee cup empty now. "All right, make it official." "And Sophie?" He met her gaze. "You're not just holding this place together. You're rebuilding it." She smiled, faint but honest. "I'm trying." "That's enough," Ethan said. He stood, glancing at the floor one last time. Lucas was helping a customer scan a QR code, his tone patient as he explained streaming options. Mia was at the service desk, troubleshooting a tablet with the same care Sophie had shown days before. The store wasn't perfect, deliveries still ran late, systems still lagged, but it was breathing again. Ethan stepped outside the glass, doors sliding shut behind him. Through the window, Store 7 looked alive, its lights bright, its people present. He thought of his father, William, and the handshake that started it all. For the first time in months, he felt like he'd kept his promise. This story isn't just about a struggling store or a CEO's undercover mission. It's about the power of human connection in a world increasingly driven by automation and metrics. In 2025, retail faces relentless pressure from e-commerce giants and AI-driven systems. But Harper Tech Store 7 reminds us that technology can't replace care. Sophie's patience with a mother and her son. Lucas's choice to mop the floor before his first day. Ethan's resolve to honor his father's legacy. These are the moments that rebuild trust, not just in a business but in people. The lesson here is simple yet profound. Leadership isn't about titles or dashboards. It's about showing up, listening, and choosing to do what's right when no one's watching. Sophie didn't start as a manager, but she became one by caring. Lucas didn't need a manual to know the floor needed cleaning. Ethan didn't need a report to see what was broken. Their story challenges us to ask, how do we show up for others in our own lives? If this tale of grit, heart, and transformation moved you, there's more to discover. Legacy Stories brings you narratives that dig into the human spirit, the kind that remind us why we keep going. Subscribe to our channel, Legacy Stories, for more tales of people who choose better, who rebuild from the ground up. Hit that button, join the journey, and let's uncover the stories that matter together.